Okay, my name is Lenord DeVanna. I'm from Massachusetts, and I was in the U.S. Army when I was 20 years old, and after training out in California and spending most of the time out in the desert out there, I figured we were going to go over to the Pacific, but after 13 months they shipped us back to the East Coast and sent us over to Europe. So we landed in Liverpool, England, went into a base there, and they were preparing to get us ready to cross the channel, and because D-Day hadn't happened, but so we were anti-aircraft. We were in the 407th Anti-Aircraft Battalion, and we waited on the banks of the channel. We had heard that the invasion had started, so we sat there waiting and saw a few bombs come in. They were bombing England, and on the 17th, on the 23rd of June 1944, we crossed the channel, and I happened to be driving a Jeep at the time for the commander of the battery, and I was apprehensive about driving into the water, so we spent 3 days waterproofing the Jeep so we wouldn't get stuck in the water, and it turned out when I finally went in, we only went up to the hubcaps. So, but that was good. And there was we had seen a lot of devastation, but most of it, as far as the first days of the invasion, we really didn't see those bodies floating in the water and so forth, but our job was to fire at the enemy aircraft. And so we traveled as much as they would let us to move up towards the front, but we could always hear the guns going off and so forth, and they finally got us settled. But it turned out that the Germans were getting very low on fuel, so they didn't send too many planes over. And as a result, General Patton had gone through on his way to Brittany, on his way to Brest. And he went through Brittany, and they decided they were going to use our anti-aircraft guns for field artillery. So we moved up, and we were not too far behind Patton, but he didn't stop. He moved very fast. So people were greeting us because we were the first Americans they had seen after him. And so they used us for field artillery, but it turned out to be a disaster for us because the Germans, they were set up and around Brest, and when we fired our guns into Brest, we got twice as many rounds back and had to move out of there because they were zeroed in on us. We lost a couple of boys during that time. Then really the only air fights that we saw were not bombers. It was strafers coming in. I guess it seemed the Germans had saved all their fuel for New Year's Day, so they flew over New Year's Day and strafed us, and fortunately they didn't get any of us. And but then that was about the end of their live aircraft, but they moved us into Belgium, because the Germans had those buzz bombs that were going in aiming for Belgium. They were pilotless aircraft, and there was no one in them, and they were radio controlled. So our job was to protect the port of Antwerp. And we could recognize them when they were coming, because they had a distinct sound of the engines. And the thing that we liked most was to hit the nose of them. They carried a ton of dynamite in the nose, and we loved it when we'd hit that nose and it'd explode in the air. But the worst thing was when we hit something else, which was part of their controls, and that made them do all kinds of loop-de-loops, and we never knew where they were going to land. And I remember being asleep in my tent, and I was so tuned to the noise of 90-millimeter guns going off that they didn't even wake me up when they were firing. But this one night they were firing, and all of a sudden I heard this different noise, and I knew it wasn't our guns. So I ran out to see what was happening, and I saw this buzz bomb diving, coming down, but then it would all of a sudden it would take a loop and go the other way. And I started to run, and I said, what am I running for? I'm probably going to run into it. So I hit the dirt, and just before I hit the dirt, the buzz bomb landed. And I was driving a Jeep at that time, but I heard this shatter of glass, and I said, oh, they got my Jeep. But when it all settled, I went over and looked, and the Jeep was okay, but there was a very large crater in the ground, and the glass was from concussion from the buzz bomb when it landed, and it shattered the glass in some of the houses around there. But all in all, we had a pretty good firing record. There was over 2,000 of them that were launched, and around 211 got through. All the rest were knocked down in the air, and which was a pretty good record, and we were recognized as having that good record. So, but shortly afterwards, there were no more buzz bombs coming over, and they sent us over to Holland, and we were kind of on a recreation program. They took away all our live ammunition and the personal ammunition, and we figured now we have it made, because pretty soon it's going to be over, and we'll be going home. But one day they suddenly issued the ammunition back. We didn't know what was happening, but it turned out that was when the Battle of the Bulge was occurring, and they were moving pretty fast to us, and we kept our fingers crossed, but fortunately that was stopped, and we didn't have any effect from it. So then, to want to know what to do with us, when the war ended, and they really didn't know, it was just killing some time until we could able to go home. So the best part of the service was they sent us to Paris, put us in a hotel in Paris right behind the Eiffel Tower, and I had no duty whatsoever except to tour parts of France. Fortunately, I was at the PX one day in line to get some cigarettes. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder, called me a bad name, jokingly, and I turned around and found it was one of my school chums. So that was great, because I had never met anybody in 2 years. So we had a good time for the rest of the time, and then we finally got sent home. And I had got married 29 days before I went overseas. So I was looking forward to going home. And I got discharged on the 2nd day of January, 1945. And that's it.
So now, when you were over there experiencing the experiences that you did, what was it like for a young man building the camaraderie that you have with your fellow servicemen at that time? What was that like?
Well, we considered ourselves pretty fortunate because our unit was formed in Camp Hahn, California, and it existed of a large group from New England, and then there was a contingency from Texas, Oklahoma, but there were about 800 men, and we pretty well stayed together, whereas we saw other units that were being replaced and transferred and everything. So it was just one big family of 800 men. And so we got along fine, and we had 3 reunions after the war was over, and it was nice seeing everybody again. And we just enjoyed each other all the time.
When was your last reunion?
Oh, came out in 1940. The last reunion was in 1948. We had one in 46, which was in New Haven, Connecticut, and we had 47 that was in Boston, where I was from. And the next one was in Worcester, Massachusetts. Then it was supposed to rotate, but somebody dropped the ball and it never happened. So, but occasionally I'd hear from somebody every once in a while. And in fact, one of my sergeants contacted me after I had started to raise a family, and one of my sergeants from New Haven, Connecticut, called me on the phone one night, and my wife was at a evening school class, and I was babysitting, and he was a salesman, and he was in Boston at a sales meeting, and he wanted me to come in with him. And I said, well, I can't because my wife is not here, and I'm babysitting. He said, well, when she comes home, come on in. And I said, well, you know, Bill, I would like to, but I got to get to work in the morning. He said, oh, we'll get you to work in the morning. Well, knowing him, I decided the best thing to do was to stay home, because he would have rolled me to work in the morning. But then I went on to raise my family and was very happy in the whole situation.
Well, I want to thank you for your service to our country. And lastly, you know, this is a weekend remembering the 66th anniversary. What does that mean to you?
I wish I could stop getting emotional. Everything that happens makes me get emotional. The memories, and I love everybody here. I wondered if I'd ever see some of these guys again, but it's just been great. It's been a wonderful experience. I was here 10 years ago when they dedicated this place, but I hadn't been able to get back, and I decided this time I would. So, and I have no regrets about coming here. It's a wonderful place.